How are you today, David? I think we're now officially live on this webinar.
Let's not say anything that we shouldn't say.
Well, that wouldn't be very interesting, would it? So you want we've got big bunch of crew coming on. So we'll just give it a minute or two. We had a large number of regos for this one. I think your reputation must precede you, David. So,
Well, I guess we're gonna people will learn the good, bad, and the ugly. But ultimately, hopefully, they take something away from it that they can benefit, even just one thing.
yeah, for sure. We'll just give it another. Numbers are still climbing, so we'll just give it another minute. You're what's the weather like in Sydney today, David? Are you sunny? Melbourne's pretty miserable.
Sunny, but it's cold. It's
Yeah,
cold. I think this is the cold period of the year. I mean, Melbourne, it's always cold. The weather's always unpredictable in Melbourne.
cool. All right. Well, I reckon 2 minutes past the hour. We've got a big crew on board, so let's kick off. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for jumping on. I am super pumped for this session. This is, well, for two reasons. One is that this is a topic that I'm super passionate about. At Firmable, we invest heavily in our SDR organization and really convicted of the opportunity to kind of build great pipeline. It's a really core part of what we do here. So it's a topic that I'm deeply passionate about. But even more so, I'm just so pumped to have David on board. He's got awesome experience. As we'll kind of get into in a little bit, he was at Eftsure and really instrumental in building what I think is one of the most impressive kind of sales orgs that's ever been built in Australia. I think the Eftsure story does not get told enough. So super pumped to have you on board, Dave. So, but before,
Awesome. I appreciate it. A pleasure to be here. I'm super excited. And yeah, I mean, it's not something I'm passionate about, the SDR function. It's pretty much all I know. I live and breathe it. So here we are. Hope the audience, I hope people are engaging, ask a lot of questions, and also possibly, challenge us.
yeah, for sure. So before we kind of jump into the content, I guess just some housekeeping rules. Thank you. So we'll obviously be recording this session. It will get distributed to everyone afterwards. Please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. I've got like a whole page of questions written down that I want to chat through with David, and I'm sure that on the way through there'll be many questions come up as well. We want this session to be really kind of practical. What we're really passionate here about at Firmable is helping people, kind of really fine tune and hone their kind of sales outreach. So we want to make this something that's really practical, really useful, and people can hopefully kind of take away some stuff that they can kind of action and implement. So as I said, this will be pretty informal. Please ask questions on the way through, and away we go. We'll aim to go for about 45 minutes. And so let's jump into it. Oh, just for context, also, there's a real mixture of kind of attendees on this webinar. We've got people from big organizations, smaller organizations. We've got people with established SDR teams through to people who are just kind of thinking about it. So so let's dive in. So I kind of alluded at the start that kind of how excited I was given the kind of the Eftsure experience. So maybe Dave, just for kind of context for those that are not as familiar with it, maybe just give a minute or two on the journey that kind of you went through at Eftsure and kind of what that'll look like.
So I guess and I don't know how many SDRs we have on this call, current SDRs who are sitting in that seat. 5 years ago, I met one of the founders. He said he may have an opportunity, and I started in the SDR seat. I was the first person doing the cold calling, figuring out the scripting, trying to understand what it all meant, what's the positioning, what's the messaging. And ultimately, which we'll get more into, is we started, we purposefully went and intentfully went and actually grew out the SDR function. what does that mean? If you look back 5 years, we went from an unknown startup, you could call it, into for the last 2 years and in a row, we've actually, one of the fastest growing companies in Australia. And that's for many reasons we'll touch in. It's obviously, the SDR function, we made sure that it was the life and blood of the organization. But yeah, the Eftsure, EFT Shore today is, it's a place that most people, SDRs, want to work, and they should continue to go, want to go there. And it's now, it's now going to become a global organization. So
Yeah,
it's just
awesome story. So just quick fire stats. So when you left, how many SDRs were there in the org?
There's circa around 50, including managers.
Yeah,
Today, it's bigger than that. In the last, I left plus minus 3 months ago. I
yeah,
think they're sitting
awesome.
maybe at 55 plus
Yeah,
without managers. And
awesome.
that's just Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, and what kind of very roughly, what proportion of kind of pipeline that was generated came from SDRs?
Yeah, in the early days, it was like 80, 90%. With time, marketing partnerships, that's come, the started um, coming down between 50 and 70%. But again, we'll go into it a bit later on. Is we always, how I see and still to this day see the SDR function is that they're a facilitator, they're an enabler. So, things are coming through marketing, but without activating it and pushing it. And same with partnerships, like, all well and great, these leads are coming in. So we always saw it, and we'll go into it a bit later in the conversation, is with our marketing, with our partnerships, without SDRs, it ultimately doesn't work. It's a team sport, this. It's not SDRs versus marketing or sales. I've never seen it like that.
So amusingly, you've got a bit of a fan club from some of your old colleagues, kind of on the chat, David.
The
So,
pressure's on now.
yeah, they're going to keep you honest, that's for sure. So, all right. So now, and so you've obviously after a huge journey there, you've now kind of out and doing your own thing. Maybe just for context for the audience, maybe tell us what you're up to now.
Yeah, so I founded a business called the Growth Factory. My hypothesis, in the last year, I've started, helping different businesses, um, and having many conversations. And ultimately, there's, the big challenge I was seeing is that businesses, especially the startups, as well as scale ups, is they find product market fit, but ultimately they get their, first few customers. They then manage to reach, use their current their networks to get further, more customers, and ultimately that then starts plateauing. But I also, what I've seen and had conversations with ASX listed companies who are B2B software types of businesses, all the way through to just a startup. Once there is that product market fit, they don't have the predictable revenue, and that comes from predictable pipeline.
Cool. Awesome. Well, let's jump into it. I think you've almost done your first slide. So
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the first slide, uh, what I was alluding to earlier is that, generally the journey of a founder, and I'm sure there's many different organizations on this webinar, is the founder generally comes from the niche, the domain expertise. They've found this problem, and ultimately they've come up with a solution. So their quick few wins, or maybe from 0 to 50 customers, is ultimately their friends, families, or their networks. Um, and then what happens is you hire your first reps. Generally, what is your first, AE or BDM, and ultimately, founders generally go and hire people from that domain expertise again, and they come with a black book or a network, whatever you want to call it, and. And then what? They've gone through their network. Yes, you've got more customers, but it's not scalable. It's not a scalable solution, that. And over my years, I learned, I first got into the SDR world. I was living in Israel, and a lot of what I learned was from a guy by the name of Richard. And Richard always spoke about everything has to be scalable. Whatever you're doing, it has to have scalability, whether that's
Yep.
your hiring process, whether that's your setting up your infrastructure, setting up pretty much everything. It has to have that scalability. Otherwise, you're spending days doing commissions. That's not as scalable. You have to come up with those scalable mechanisms. So, pipeline's just the tip of the iceberg. But ultimately, what are the things that you don't see that create a scalable, predictable outbound motion or SDR function? Um, so I guess in today's discussion, we're going to look at, what are those systematic issues that come up while scaling? What are how do you track those deficiencies? What are those conversions? Where are the bottlenecks? What's going on? How do you identify them? And then how do you go and fix them? So before we get, stuck into all of this, I guess the key question here is, why invest in SDRs? I mean, Paul, you're you've been in multiple businesses and at Firmable. When would like why do you invest in your SDRs at Firmable? What is the business case as a CEO?
Yeah, yeah. I think and I love your framing around predictable pipeline and predictable revenue because that's the when you're growing a business, you're clearly investing for growth. And one of the real challenges is, okay, how do I have confidence when I invest that I'm going to get predictable return and predictable growth and particular kind of customer acquisition. So I think that's the number and different channels have different kind of economics. But the great thing about particularly an SDR channel, if you get it right, is it can be really scalable, as you talked about, and really linear. So you know that if you can get, assuming your market's big enough, if you can get 5 SDRs contributing, there's no reason you can't get 10 SDRs contributing. Then there's no reason you can't get 20, which is really the Eftsure kind of journey. So that was one thing. That's how do we get some real kind of predictable pipeline running through? So that was one. I think the other reason too, particularly when you're early on, like you just learn so much by having a bunch of, by having a kind of an SDR team kind of hitting the market. Like it was just such an important part of our journey was getting that first couple of early, kind of getting Oscar and Blair on board, and those guys hitting the phone and just listening to them talk and just starting to learn what was happening. So I think we got a huge amount of learning from it. Yeah, I think that was really what was driving us.
Yeah, so I think for people who are on this call trying to figure out, well, I don't have an SDR function. What does it mean even? When are you ready to have that SDR function? And I think before, and everything Paul touched on, the feedback loop, the predictability in pipe generation. But ultimately, I think before you go and invest in an SDR team, you have to have a business case. And what is that identifier? I think the moment you have um, enough referenceability, social proofs, but even before that, that stuff comes. That's just a grind. You have to grind to get that. It's those first quick, not necessarily quick wins, those wins you had to fight for become the stories you go and tell and when you pitch and when but you have to have product market fit.
Yeah.
Like the founder needs to figure all of this out. They need to know. I actually spoke to Paul. I don't know if you remember. We spoke to you in 2023 it would have been. Maybe that's when you probably found it.
You were
A
very gracious back then. So
previous colleague or former colleague Daniel, me and Daniel Harab,
yeah,
I actually remember exactly we had that conversation. We actually were begging you for the product. And you say, no, we're in beta, it's not ready yet, it's not ready yet. Um, and ultimately you need to know when you're ready. Like when do you actually go full throttle to market? But once you do know that, the things, the learnings, the ability to understand pretty quickly. If you do all of this correctly, within a couple of weeks, you actually start knowing what's going on. You know what the messaging that resonates. You know what the value proposition is, at least on the phones.
Yeah.
Further down the funnel, you learn more and more and more. But you got to be speaking to people. You got to be getting into people's, in
Yeah.
setting up those meetings. And the toughest thing is I'm biased to SDR. I don't think closing, and I must be careful what I say here, but closing is you you need to be semi-decent at closing. If you put in the numbers, you'll get customers. Like if you book in 100 meetings, you might only get 2 customers, or you could get 20 customers out of those 100 meetings. So ultimately, it's the moment you find product market fit, that's when you want to be start pushing this, start thinking, okay, well,
Yeah.
now it's time to scale.
Yeah, 100%. If you've got product market fit and you can consistently generate pipeline and you consistently close one, you've got an ability to kind of really hypercharge growth. So yeah.
So in terms of what does that look for? What are the pillars? What are the key things that we look for when we're trying to build out an SDR function? Or even when there's an existing SDR function, I often see people just doing things and not really understanding and knowing what to look out for. It's not rocket science, this game. You got to pick the phone up, speak to people, and book in meetings, but it is a lot more complex than that. It's not as easy as it sounds. It is what I like to say. It's the best worst job in the world. It's a tough job, and it comes with a lot. So I guess the 4 Ps that I like to go by is you have to have the people in place. There's people, there's process, there's your tech stack, your platform, what you're using, how you're using it, and ultimately it all comes down to performance. Like sales, especially this game, is a high performance type of it's a professional sport, you could call it this. So when it comes to what we're going to get more into is, hiring the right, what do we look for? What are those processes? And ultimately the platform and performance. So I guess, when does outbound action, and this is
I love
actually,
this topic. Yeah, yeah,
this
this
is
is
from
awesome.
Winning by Design, which, there's lots of value, but this is a graphic visual of where's that outbound sweet spot. Now, I think in context to this graph, this is American based, or predominantly this isn't specific to the Australia. The beauty of Australia is that we've got a more efficient funnel when it comes to SDRs. And why is that? Because we're not getting bombarded all day. Imagine it being a CFO or a RT manager in the US. So your connect rates are tough. But I guess I would say anything from $5,000 plus a year.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree, David. Like, it's super interesting. I vividly remember having a conversation with one of our investors, and he was like, "You just can't make, kind of outbound SDR work with ACVs less than 25K." And I'm like, "Well, I know you can because I've spoken to you. I know an organization that's done it, and we're going to prove that we've done it." And yeah, so yeah, we absolutely, yeah. So we're in the kind of, kind of 5 to 10 range, kind of average, and absolutely the economics work for us. And so I think there's a bit of a fallacy that it can't work at a more transactional, like, assuming your connect rates and your conversions assuming the maths works, of course. But yeah, and
And
what
yeah, the maths isn't so difficult to work out. Paul, you were going to ask me a question.
Yeah, so it kind of, so you can probably work down to that, 10,000, 5,000, depending on your kind of, depending on your specific situation. At what point do you think, so I guess, how does SDR change as you start doing bigger enterprise? Like, so there's a bit of a sweet spot, which is that kind of mid-market. Like, how does it change when you're kind of selling kind of much larger enterprise deals?
So, I've got my unconventional approach. I'm a big believer in to get the meeting is almost equal effort. At the end of the day, you're dealing with people, and people are people. It doesn't matter what organization you're part of. In terms of, I do think you have to be a lot, we at Eftsure in my final, couple months, we brought on, a really focused enterprise rep with many, many years experience. And, I learned a lot about how you have to be the conductor of the deal, so
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
bringing in all the
Yes.
various stakeholders and you're multi-threading the organization. But in every single interaction you're having within an organization, maybe let's use BHP as an example, whether you're going after or maybe for a firmable audience or more tech if you're going after an Atlassian or a Canva and you're trying to sell
Yeah,
to them, there might be 5 stakeholders involved in the
yeah,
buying committee, but to get that meeting still means you have to pick the phone
yeah.
up, you have to understand how many conversations you have to have. So I mean, in terms of, when you speak about the numbers and what a winning SDR motion and the metrics look like, I think there's a range. In the early days at Eftsure, we were getting 20+% in connect rates, which then normalized at
So so just connect rate. So that's, making a call, someone pick up the phone. That's a connect rate. Yep.
the intended person picking up the phone. So
Got
the
it. Yep.
person who you're trying to get hold of, or
So maybe start at the top. So how many calls a day, I guess. So how many
so
calls
I
a day?
think I think if you look, if you look at dials between SMB and enterprise, why mid-market and enterprise I think should be a little bit lower is there's a lot more, there's a lot more research
Yeah.
and understanding of the organization and who you need to speak to and understanding and the account mapping that comes with that. Um, but I guess as you figure that all out, I think so then that would be number of dials per day.
Yeah.
And then out of those dials, you'll speak to, I've seen as low as 8%, but I think if you're lower than 10%, it's something you should probably look into.
Yeah. Kind of one of the things that we learned, and it's kind of obvious, but connect rate is a bit of a function of who you're calling into. Like, so we call into sales professionals who naturally answer their phone, right? So if you're calling doctors, doctors never answer their phone, right? So it's actually varies. Like the maths varies depending on who you're selling into. So
But there's in everything there's trade-offs, and I've
yeah,
learned it. I've worked, over the last couple months, all different verticals, all different personas. A doctor, yes, they don't answer the phone, but they pay someone whose job is to answer the phone. A reception desk, they've got. So the question then is, well, how do you then go and infiltrate or
yeah,
work out how do you get in front of the so it's got its trade-offs. Yes, that's a different skill, but at least you're speaking to people all day because
yeah,
the connect rate of an organization, for example, a doctor, whether specialist or GPs, they would have over 60% connect rate
yeah.
because
So we go number of calls, connect rate, and then we go kind of meetings booked. Conversion from meetings booked. So
um
and
so
then
so
yep.
So
So
yeah, we'll go to the meeting, the number of meetings booked, and I think
then,
the important thing, and we could, later on, and mindful of time, is we've got to, you got to look at every single metric down the funnel. But ultimately, when it comes to the SDR function, there's inputs and then
yep,
there's conversions. So
yep,
what is the healthy inputs? I mean, the main one is, dials or activities. I went to a round table maybe about 6 months ago, and a lot of SDR leaders, and I guess it's very dependent on what you're selling, who you're selling to. Is it transactional selling? Is it more of a sophisticated sell? But ultimately, I'm a big believer in just old school hard work. Pick the phone up, keep grinding. It's the reps will start looking after the conversions, and it's something you can control. I don't believe entirely with emailing. I think, yes, you will get results. Yes, that's what makes the best because they get 10-15% more because they get 1 or 2 extra meetings a month. And if it compounds over a year, if you annualize it, and then you apply, it could be if you're scaling at a big and there's many reps, it can be tens or hundreds or millions of dollars, the difference between emailing and not emailing. But I think it's important to, from my experience, is you got to pick the phone up. Anyone who's not picking the phone up and making that their primary KPI, I haven't seen emailing work I've never seen it work properly. But
Uh,
sequencing, all these things, there's got to be phone involved.
cool. No, 100% great.
And that, in saying, the more dials, more activities ultimately leads to more conversations. If you put the conversions for anyone on the call trying to figure it all out, what is that is healthy? You can work it out on the back of a napkin. All of this, it's not
Yeah, it's
the
a
tough.
five-line spreadsheet. It's a five-line spreadsheet. We actually a while back we shared there's a blog post I did where we shared ours, which is kind of our funnel and the metrics, and so that's out there, and very happy to share that with anyone who's interested. It looks a bit different. Every company looks a bit different, but that's a bit of an example of how to set it up if anyone's interested.
So, just to touch on this, what does normal meetings held per month look like? I don't know I think SMB, and if you put the unit economics and everyone, SMB is different in many organizations. What's that? Is it employee count? Is it revenue? Is it number of seats? But as you go up, you do start coming down. Yes, I said earlier that, us treat them almost equal, but also there's only a limited amount of enterprise. So you can't burn these leads. You
Yeah,
can't be as aggressive. You want to pick more carefully. The more targeted, the better your conversions become. So, I guess moving on to hiring, I've always hired based on these principles. To run through it, when it comes to an SDR, the idea is what's the storytelling ability? Can people hold a conversation? There's a whole hiring process. Every business has it differently. Do do a phone a call to screen them? Do you then take them through a Teams? Do you then have them in person? My favorite part to understand if someone's a storyteller, at Eftsure, I always used to go meet them in the lobby. And why was that? Because I wanted lifts are awkward. Elevators, lifts, it's an awkward environment. Like, can someone actually have a conversation with me on the way up who's about to interview them? And I could tell within the
that's
lift.
awesome. That's such a great interview hack. I've never heard that.
And I knew by then, by the time you come out the lift, it's either they can tell a story or not.
Yeah. So if someone got to the right floor and then you immediately press ground again, that was a bad sign. So it took them back down to the elevator and didn't let them get off. So
There's and I hope we did a lot of hiring through early work, and we used to do these group interviews. So sometimes, if the office was full and everyone was in like on a Thursday, there was never enough meeting rooms to do the one-on-ones when we used
yeah.
to play cards. And I once had this I just took the guy. I'm like, listen, we're going to do it in the lift. We're going to go down. We're going to go back up. Um, so it's it's a good environment, but it's challenging for the candidate.
Yeah, I think I was listening to a great podcast the other day, and it's and you kind of talked about the best worst job you ever had. Like, one thing that I've loved watching, and getting to know the SDR team coming through a Firmable, there is some incredibly talented, people coming through, right? And they're early in their career, but you can just tell they're going to be absolute gun sales professionals. And I think what you learn in the SDR role is so important.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the SDR role, like there's not many roles where you get so that it's an interesting one. It's like it's a role it's not undervalued, but it's a junior role. So it's a very overvalued role. And I think organizations are as time evolves, they start to realize like this is the most invaluable. People don't always have I guess if you've got don't have a closing issue, then it's like, hang on, how do we get that predictability? Okay, well, you're not going to go, so it's a cost effective function, but you can't go and get someone who's late in their career because it comes with a price. So, the training, the development, the ability, which we'll move on into in a second. But before that, what I always like to understand is the integrity and honesty of a person.
Yep.
What motivates them and why? ambition, and also what's at stake. It's a big one that, and it's sometimes people are incredibly ambitious, but they don't have anything at stake. And sometimes
Yeah.
some people have everything at stake, but maybe not necessarily
So,
ambitious.
so two kind of quick questions. What sort of backgrounds and kind of experience levels do you reckon make
So,
sense?
so I mean, I think you can, if I look back at the many, over the years, we've hired hundreds and hundreds of SDRs, and that's not because of attrition only. And Eftsure, we'll touch on it, is we learned a lot about culture. If how do you bring people in and keep them in? It's not only about bringing them in, it's about keeping them in. But I think it's always I love the tradies. I love, health care professionals. And the reason is, and it's not only specific to them, but they know what that work ethic looks like. They know what it's like to wake up at 5 in the morning and be in site by 7. And you talk about healthcare, it's like, that's a tough job. I remember when I had after I had my first kid, I came back to work and I'm like, you don't realize how lucky you all are. You sit in air conditioning all day. You've got comfortable ergonomic chairs. You've got the ability to control how much you earn. These healthcare nurses, they don't have the ability to do that. The more effort they put in, they don't earn more.
I'm going to talk up the quality of our chairs in interviews much more often, Dave.
So, and then also people changing careers. I've had
Yeah.
lawyers who have joined our SDR function, engineers, whether it's software, civil engineers, there's all different types of people. But it comes down to work ethic, ability to you care, to be motivated, to be serious about your career, and then the maturity, just be if you're hiring an 18, 20-year-old, that doesn't mean that they're immature. That doesn't, they
Oh,
could
yeah.
have life experience. They could have lived overseas. They've traveled, their parents,
Yeah.
makes it's what experience have you had, not necessarily. I think
100%.
the right attitude is anything you can teach, especially in this game. It's sales at the end of the day. There's no wrong from right.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. All right. Let's box on.
So in terms of, I think, and I learned this, and I saw Sam comment on my LinkedIn earlier, but, I always thought progression, you needed always to have opportunity, and you always needed to have empty seats, and you needed to be a fast growing business. So therefore you can keep promoting people. And by the way, that's all true. I've always had this. I always used to tell, and I still believe it is hard work always wins. And if you're working hard and you becoming successful and you're encouraging your colleagues to be successful, ultimately that pushes growth forward. And if you've got growth, well, that means there's more opportunities in an organization. But it's not as simple as that. And I think, Sam came to Eftsure and he pushed, how do you have these different levels? How do you have micro progressions? And what does that mean? It's not only about earning ability. And these are all fictitious. I've just thrown in random numbers here. But in terms of, there's a financial aspect to it. As you hit targets, as you start onboarding, as you start progressing, as you start contributing to the organization, well, what ownership can you have within the organization? What ownership, what tasks, what projects can SDRs work on? At the end of the day, they're there predominantly for two reasons. One is to make money. Two is to learn and progress. You can't do this job forever. And I think for any SDR person, founder, or the people in the leadership would understand this. This is a tough job.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate how difficult it is. You can have tough days. You can have tough moments. I always like to use the analogy as test match cricket. It's why is it called test match? Why is the Ashes the penultimate, the top of the cricket and sporting world in Australia? It's because it's the challenge of all challenges, and it's challenging this. It's all day, every day. So you got to give them ownership, and also the clarity and visibility of expectations. Like, how do you get promoted? It's not because we play ping pong together, or we go out for beers or whatever it may be. It's crystal clear. There's no favoritism. It's black and white, and people know what to head to. And I think when you're building an SDR function, it's a lot about recognition. And it's about creating the right culture. I would used to say to the team, and still and I'm setting this up in different organizations now, is how do you make it a performance first culture? However, it also comes with the ping pong and the PlayStations, and the winners' lunches, and the spiffs. For those of you who don't know what a spiff is, it's a sales performance incentive fund, which basically you can run competitions, but ultimately it drives performance always. It always leads back coming to performance. We're in the business of creating growth, is in getting more revenue, so to speak. The beauty of the SDR role is if you win as a graduate, you can make good money. Why? Because you're contributing directly. You're a revenue generator. You're not a cost center in the organization. So you have to have the screens up in the office, the competitions, the gamification of targets, and it needs to be visible. Unfortunately, it's a black and white role. That makes it really it gives the ability to unfortunately, on the negative and on the positive side.
So two questions, David. So one, can you, like, and I 100% agree with you how important culture is, and getting that environment right, because it's an energy and there's lots of intangibles to it. So can you make it work remotely? So
Yeah, great question. I mean, in the early days, I joined Eftsure in 2020, and we did do it remotely. We used to have catch-ups in the park, Centennial Park in Sydney. I believe, specific to this role, I'm almost like a 4-to-1 in the office, 4 days
yeah,
in, 1 day out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's a lot.
it's harder to, you also have to be realistic. We're in a modern era. The types of candidates, and the is a 3 days, 2 days. But there's so much you learn in the office, and forget about the sales world. You're learning about.
Yeah. No, exactly. Because that's what like people like as an SDR, you want to be developing, right? And you will develop quicker if you're around your colleagues and in the office. And it's, yeah, 100%.
And what I've seen is, it's forget about, we talk about like going back to the progression plan, is the people who are in the office 5 days a week. We had managers, we had SDRs at Eftsure, who progressed within 6 months to becoming managers,
Yeah.
and becoming AEs. As soon as
Yeah.
as soon as you're out of probation, you can go and get promoted. Never mind the micro progressions, you could actually go the promotions. And those same people all have the same character traits. Whether they have to be in the office or don't have to be, they pretty much are. Now, can you do it remotely? Yes. I mean, people do it all over the US, and
But it's harder.
but it makes it harder for the
Agree.
individual being the SDR and the business, because everything becomes quicker. And when we talk about onboarding, on-ramping, learning, the ability on it, whenever, I'm going into, the organizations today and at Eftsure, it's not, time is a virtue of, it doesn't take 3 months to ramp up an SDR. It's how much can they absorb in a space of time? How much
Yeah.
inputs can they put in? It's like going to gym, or going for a run. It doesn't take 3 months to get fit. It takes 3 times a week. You have to go for a run of a certain amount of kilometers, and it depends on fitness. It's the same in this world. It's effort equals outputs, input equal output. So the quicker you can get people understanding the product, in that first week, can you get product, process, people, and platform? In the second week, it's all about building confidence. I think you should be, I don't think it makes a difference how complex a product is. It should never be so complicated that you can't pitch it on a phone in 20 seconds. Otherwise, you don't know where your you don't know what your problem is, and you don't know what your solution is. People don't care about the complexities of how you solve it. I mean, I'm sure Paul, I mean, it's the how did you get my number on the phone? Yeah, that's an objection. Well, there's this organization called Firmable. Well, how do you soften that? How do you the people, how does Firmable get their numbers? I don't personally, it doesn't make it as long as we're getting the numbers. And then the second week to the first month, I'd say is about confidence, really strong objection in handling, but by the end of that,
Yeah, I love that kind of focus on confidence. I think, yeah, get on the phones early, but like make it give your early SDRs confidence. Let them feel some early wins. Let them feel they can contribute. Like confidence breed confidence. People start leaning in. It's so important.
and I think in organizations and founders and is you have to set a school fees in the beginning. It's part of their cost to the business. It's the
Yeah,
cost of doing business. So pay them their early commissions. Guarantee them that any meeting they set up, it can't get disqualified. Why? Because then they go, oh, I booked a meeting, and then
yeah, yeah,
two
yeah.
leads to four, four leads to 10. Once you book 10 meetings in, then you can start
Yeah,
tightening
I
the
and like
qualification. Is it the right person? Did it result in a deal? Because I don't necessarily entirely believe, I've seen people, everyone have different scripts, and people are people. People resonate differently. But ultimately, it comes down to conviction on the phone. And what does conviction come from? It comes from the ability to have confidence. So I think by month three, I know I said earlier, it's not just time. You want to start seeing people really coming up to speed. By month four, they should be really, really fully hitting, be comfortable, be self-sufficient, and accountable.
yeah,
Um, just
awesome.
conscious of time over here in terms of, I guess what I mentioned earlier. I think to this day, and what I see and what I'm trying to build and advise businesses and founders on is there's no such thing as a silver bullet in this game. One of the founders of Eftsure, Mark Ontarovich, and then Gavin Levinson, um, who I learned a fortune about hiring, the right people and what you look for, is Mark used to say is it's many, many lead bullets that builds an organization. I think it's true to any sales org too. It's the small things that just add up and they compound and they have it's the small things that have big impact. And if you amplify that by different organizations. So, the analogy I always love using is I'm a big Formula One fan. I actually used to, in the early days or the first couple of years at Eftsure, we used to there's a master class. It's called A Winning Mindset by Lewis Hamilton. And my onboarding actually was all Formula One analogy. And why is that? Because the SDR role is not seen as the most important, but it's as significant as the Formula One driver. And who's
Yeah,
the Formula One driver? The people who bring in the revenue. Someone closes $1 million deal, they're the heroes, but there's an entire team behind that, and it's important to recognize that. And we never ever, myself, Daniel, Nick, we never ever used to tussle who it got attributed to in the early days. I mean, I'm sure as the business gets bigger, you need to know where budget needs to go and things need to become more refined and frameworks around it. But it was always, okay, this is a Formula One function. This is, you need your team principal. You need the race engineers. If you don't have a strategy around things, it's just one pit stop messes up your whole race. One, whether the rain forecast and that's how you have to set up the organization. It comes down to, when we talk about platform, it's the ability to capture, to understand it in a way that you can actually pinpoint where you're winning, where you're losing. And that's what on a race day, on a race weekend, if you look at the Formula One weekend, it's got to do with practice rounds, capturing all the data, different setups. You then have the pit crew, who's the most important persons if you think about it. If a tire stop is 2, 3 seconds long, it can cost you 10 positions. It could be the difference between winning and the SDR function is that. So, I guess from a point, if you call it the power triangle, is who does SDR report in marketing, sales?
yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
there's maybe a matter of differences, but ultimately everyone needs each other. This isn't a RRR or function versus function. This is a team sport. Uh,
100%.
so I guess when I think, just in terms of, you know, um, and I actually have a little spot over here, which is meant to be for a, blended model. But in terms of, what we found at a point at Eftsure was how do we bring in a tiered structure, and this is true to many businesses that I've seen, is when it comes to commissioning and pushing your reps. I think that it all depends. Like, how do you commission your reps? So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
there's
and this is the whole webinar in itself, I reckon, David. So,
probably,
yeah.
but without a doubt. And I mean, in short summary, I think it's got to do with there's three key ways you can do it. There's tiers, there's based on value of the meeting you
Yeah.
set up, or it could be a combination of deals won with pipeline generated, with meetings
Yeah.
held. Um, so I guess, just to wrap it all up, ultimately, from a tech stack point of view, again, I've tried to do a lot of the automations. We've, in the early days of Eftsure, then we kind of went back. We've always do we use the outreaches, the sales lofts? And this isn't specific to Eftsure, this is just general. I believe, whether it's Salesforce or HubSpot, like I like, and what we've seen is keeping everything on one platform if it's possible. But when it comes to for me, when I actually joined an Eftsure and not to Firmable wasn't around, I only had one condition when I joined. I didn't care necessarily if that is CRM, but I needed a data enrichment and sales intelligence tool. Because
Yeah.
how do you do your job then? Like how? I mean, unless you're getting 90% inbound, maybe that's a different conversation. But when we talk about outbound, firmable, and it's the key thing that I really require. This is a whole couple webinars. I'm no clay expert or how it integrates with a firmable or a relevance AI and all these different things. So yeah, I mean, Paul, in terms of just to summarize it all is, when you're building these SDR functions, whether you're a mature business, whether you're looking to add another element of growth, I think it's all about the people, the processes you put in place, how you capture everything, how you understand the data. You need the platform to do it, and ultimately, well, what is the performance? So yeah, I think it's probably time. I mean, in terms of from a firmable point of view,
So yeah, I've got a couple of questions kind of came through, David. So yeah, so this we both David and I are very passionate about the metrics and the compensation structures. So we literally could have chatted for an hour on that whole topic. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are keen to have some really detailed questions around compensation, around metric frameworks. I know David will be very happy to chat to anyone individually about that as a follow-up, as would I. And of course, we'll circulate, say, the deck. So a couple of questions there. One question that came through from Tim, which was, look, it's a bit of an art and science, being a successful kind of SDR. You've obviously over the journey experienced SDRs who are working hard, putting in the effort, making the calls, but not necessarily kind of getting the outcome. Like, what's your approach to someone in that situation? How do you try and help them? How do you try and support them?
yeah. So I think if I've always been very data, and the data can tell the story. Sometimes it's the inputs there, but the outputs aren't there, and that can generally lead to mainly two things, I believe. One is your conversations you're having, like.
Yep.
And that I'll get into in a second. Or two is possibly your process, your approach.
Yep.
Are you getting information before? Are you confirming their, I don't know how often Firmable's updating their database, but maybe you looked last time there wasn't a mobile number. Today there is a mobile number. And the best reps do that. They always just validating everything. Do they still work there? Are they at LinkedIn? What is their LinkedIn profile? Can you identify a customer that maybe they used to work at? So you can just subtly name drop that.
Yep.
So it's process coming into the call, and generally you can see that from a connect rate point of view, which would be like from a validation of the contactable information. When it comes to the actual conversations, well, you need to start saying, okay, hang on. Is it tone? Is it speed? You know, are you mirroring? Like, are you a snake? Do you follow like the Karate Kid? You know, if someone speaks slowly, slow down. If they soft, be soft. And then the fun, that little art that comes with it is, do they know when to push? Do they know how to push? Do they know how to? I've always used the word aggressive, and it's the wrong word. And of recent, it's, are they assertive? Do they control? Does the tail wag the dog, or does the dog wag the tail? And the good reps know how to subtly
Mm.
bring them into the journey of joining the, say, the buy-in journey, or coming to a meeting, and why. And now it's the tiny things, and you have to listen, you have to sit with them. That's why being in the office is important.
Yeah, for sure. So, some other questions kind of coming in now. So, one great question from Steve, which question around how important is having kind of brand awareness. And one of the things that we feel strongly about at Firmable is, and David talked about this in his presentation. It's not just one function alone. Like it's a team sport. So absolutely, awareness and familiarity makes you more likely to get to get meetings when you connect. Right? There's absolutely no doubt about that. So
I
so you
think,
should. So the more you can do socials, and the more you can do it all in combination, the better. So
yeah, touching on that is ultimate, the ability to have influence. Most people think inbound's just going to turn on. You're going to get thousands of people reaching out, begging you to buy the product. I haven't seen that work too many times, but what it does, it influence everything. And what you see is conversions get healthier. If you've got the ability to be at conferences and you've got the budget, it helps
sure.
significantly.
Yeah. So another question came through was again on the specifics of kind of salary ranges. So we can, and probably we can, another one, very happy to chat offline. The numbers Dave put up before are a bit indicative. Like I think as a couple of principles I'd say is you clearly want a strong variable element. Firmable, we're 70/30 because we're a bit earlier. So we've kind of dialed up our base relative to our variable. I think as an organization matures, you can get more towards 50/50. So there's a few factors that play in there. But yeah, that's like David's got some really deep experience on that. So if you want to have a conversation with him around that, really encourage you to kind of reach out, and he could chat you through his experience there. And we had a long discussion on this very point in the pre-call. So another question from Jono. So it's around the minimum deal size where having that kind of SDR, kind of AE, kind of handover doesn't work. I think is there a minimum size? It's actually the opposite, I would say. Like I think the smaller the deal size, the more you want your AEs closing and your SDRs kind of appointment setting. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
I think if you're running a super efficient operation, and
Yeah.
your, number of days to close has impact on that. How quickly are you closing them from the time you meet them?
Yep.
If you can close it in a day or two, and you can really, you don't want your AEs doing follow-up work. You don't want them chasing new deals, because then it just makes no sense. They're too expensive of a resource. But yeah, I think you can make it work. It depends how efficient you become.
Yeah. So I guess just maybe one final kind of wrap up question for me. So if you're out there, kind of convicted that, you should try investing in SDRs to kind of help grow your business. So I guess at that point, you've got three paths. You can set out to try and do it yourself. You can work with someone like yourself to help kind of set it up. Or I guess you can utilize, there's a lot of people who, and very, very good people, very good organizations there who kind of do outsourced kind of SDR. Like, what's your take on, kind of outsourced SDR versus doing it yourself?
I think it is such a difficult role, and having control of it is significantly important and valuable.
Yeah.
Uh, especially when it starts working, you would want to bring that in-house irrespective. But I would definitely lean towards in-house, because not to say it can't work, but you then just one of the outsource. It's a campaign, so to speak.
Yeah,
But when you're trying to test it out, I would say a founder should push for, if they can find the ability or the time
yeah,
or someone in the organizations, the sales lead, can they get on the phone for the first week or two because it assists with onboarding messaging, understanding what those key metrics are. They've got the ability to do it and you can learn and absorb, and then you can use that to then go and train up
yeah.
your initial
That's
hire.
probably a good way to think about it. Is it if you're thinking about it as a pilot or a campaign, then I think outsource can be a really powerful kind of short-term solution. But I think if you see it long-term as a core capability, which we do, then I think it makes sense to have it ultimately have it in-house. But there's a certain and what's the I guess a follow-up question to that. What's the kind of the minimum size team or scale? Like it's really hard to have a lone SDR, right? Like what's the minimum size team you can have for it to be, a strong, robust, kind of learning organization?
I think you could have one, but bearing in mind the nature of the role,
Yeah,
and the energy and effort that's required to get it up and running, you don't want to start having attrition with that one person and keep filling the seat. Two is you've got a buddy, three's a party, from an SDR point of view.
I love it. Three's a
But
party.
one is tough. Can it work? Yes. I mean, I've done it by myself when I first got to Australia, but it's lonely. You come home from
Yeah,
work, you're defeated.
yeah.
It's tough.
Awesome. No, 100%. So three's a party. I reckon that's our finishing note. So we are right at time now. So super session, David. Like that was. I feel like we could have gone for about 3 hours there, but we we were disciplined and we didn't. So but thanks so much for your time. And as a reminder, any other questions we can answer directly. I just really encourage you, anyone who's thinking about starting an SDR function or is interested in just getting some advice or just wants to chat, please reach out to David. We're obviously very happy to chat and share our experiences. Clearly, if you want help on how to feed your SDR team, how to provide the right data, how to feed that data into them, how to utilize signals and events to better improve the effectiveness of your outreach, then we're obviously very, very happy to chat as well. But super session, really, really grateful for all your time, David, and look forward to chatting again soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it, everyone. Have a wonderful day. And Paul, all the best.
No, I
Keep
see you soon, mate.
cheers, cheers.